Hello, Austin County. Today I'm here with Bryan McAuley and Nicole Shadle of the San Felipe de Austin State Park located in San Felipe, Texas. And did I say that correctly?
So the history of the town would be Spanish pronunciation, so San Felipe de Austin, but the modern town pronunciation is typically San Philip is what they call it. Okay. And we are a state historic site, so we're partners, sister sites to the state park. San Felipe, the town, has actually both. We have a state park just down the road from us at Stephen F. Austin, and then we're the historic site on the bluff over the Brazos River.
Okay. All right. And I tell you what, if you haven't been there, go. I only went for a little bit, and I'm so excited. I can't wait to go back. But for the people who are not from our area, can you give us just a little brief history of why this location and this gentleman is significant in Texas history?
Sure. And not to insult locals, we're still a fairly unknown site. Even a lot of local people are finding us. So I'm going to give you some information for both of those audiences that can help them figure this out. Obviously, as the name of the site implies and the name of the town, Stephen F. Austin is the namesake related to the historic footprint. 200 years ago, he founded a town there where our historic site is located to serve as the headquarters of his land operation in Mexican Texas. So that's of the six flags over Texas. We always kind of say that's our flag that was flying 90% plus time in the town's short history, the historic town's history. So Stephen F. Austin is what we call an impresario in 7th grade Texas history. He's a land agent who has a responsibility from the Mexican government to recruit immigrants. Okay. Mexico's trying to lure people here. Most of the immigrants are Americans from the American South, but there are people that come from other places, from Germany, from Europe, from Canada, so there are other distant travelers. In terms of the significance of the site, people who are trying to make a decision about how this fits into the Texas story as they're trying to approach it, we're kind of at the very front end of this settlement movement that brings these immigrants to Texas. And on the back end of that story, leading to the Republic of Texas, you have political strife, you have conflict and frustration over how Mexico is organizing itself politically and governmentally, and that leads to the Texas Revolution. So San Felipe is a primary player in the revolution story. What our visitors are surprised to learn, we're not an independent site initially, right? So we're talking about change in government, we're talking about going to war with Mexico, but the independent story plays out on someone else's stage. You go to Washington on the Brazos for that story directly. A lot of the same people, so we're connected. We like to tell people almost anyone you can think of who's part of the Texas independence story, the Mexican Texas story in that era, came to San Felipe for something, with the exception of one David Crockett. I can't put him on the ground there. But everybody else, including Sam Houston, including Santa Ana, were the hometown of William Barrett Travis and a number of other prominent folks.
Okay. Now, I realized that in my excitement to get into everything that I did not ask what each role you guys play. So, Bryan, what is your role in the museum?
So I'm the director at the museum, and I'm privileged to have been assigned to this property and its development back in 2008. So I came on at the very beginning of the transfer of sites that had originally been managed by Parks and Wildlife. Okay. So as I mentioned after your first introduction, the historic site we manage was part of the state park initially, going back to the 1940s. And then the historic section was fragmented off, and we've added to that. So we've added some acreage, including where we built the modern visitor center. So I'm very excited to be involved in the development of the project. Our goal has been for almost the last 20 years putting together a more significant visitor experience, and that development's ongoing. We'll tell you more about that tonight.
Okay. And Nicole, I'm sorry, I did not ask what your role is. Yeah. Tell us about what you do.
I am the lead educator at the museum, and that essentially means that I'm in charge of making sure all the education programs are on the calendar. We have a good lineup of different programs for people of all ages, and making sure that visitors have a good experience when they come and visit us.
All right, so you're the one that I call and say, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
And when do I need to come?
Exactly.
I tell you what.
You always need to come. The answer to that is always yes.
Always. It's the whole thing. What do I like to eat? Yes. Yeah. What's going on? Yes. Okay, well, good. That's the thing. Okay. And as Bryan and I were sitting and talking, he was telling me all kind of nifty things, and this was interesting to me. I was like,
sure.
What is this?
So you asked earlier about kind of documents and associated things. I often tell people one of the reasons it took us as long as it did for there to be a substantive museum at San Philip, is that we were struggling to figure out where the story existed. And this is great evidence. This is an archival piece that comes off of a probate file that's actually held in the archives of the Austin County Clerk's Office. But it's a pre-independence story. So this is someone who died living in the town and it was part of Austin's colony. And then this stamp was put on it. Stephen F. Austin had gone into the interior of Mexico at one point and brought back a set of stamps for the different legal functions of his town. And this stamp happens to represent the court system. The word juzgado is related to courts. And so that's why it was used for a probate filing after someone had died. And in terms of building the museum, I alluded to it taking us some time. We are what a lot of museums would call object poor. When we got to the party, we didn't own a lot of things we could put behind glass and celebrate. We do have a fabulous Stephen F. Austin associated item, which was a desk built for him. We think it's the 200th birthday of the desk this year. We think it was made in 1825. Wow. So that's one of the signature pieces in our collection. But for a lot of the stuff, we have to go find it. We find it through archival research and from partners who loan us things that we can display.
Okay. We
do have a temporary gallery where we install exhibits that are things we can manipulate and kind of bring in stories that didn't make the original cut based on things we can borrow and utilize in that function. And then we're going to talk a little bit about archaeology. That's the other way we continue to add to our artifact base. We find our own things to help tell stories.
Okay, now this picture right here kind of, I guess some...
Spoiler alerts for people that don't know. Yeah.
I was going to say that, and this is why there's not a lot.
Right. So when we have school kids, one of the things the staff and the volunteers will often joke with them about is, we're not touring Stephen F. Austin's house today, right? There aren't, that original historic fabric was lost. What a lot of our visitors don't realize that it was lost somewhat intentionally. So Sam Houston's army during the retreat that historians refer to as the Runaway Scrape had a number of towns that they passed through, destroyed, burned by fire, in order to disrupt the supply chain for the Mexican army, which was chasing him. Ultimately they get all the way across Texas to the battle site at San Jacinto. So that whole way along, there's people being evacuated, being pushed forward. They're trying to stay out of the way of where these armies might land. And in our case, the town paid the ultimate sacrifice, and the residents who lived there had their properties burned. A lot of our visitors still show up. And in fact, the state used to do some promotional things where they got this wrong in the 60s and 70s and had pictures made of Mexican troops burning the town. The town was burned before the Mexican troops ever got there. It was very deliberate as a war strategy. And so that's why we're an archaeological site today. That's why we needed to find a place to build a modern building. I don't have extant architecture. I don't have historic buildings. We've tried to fill that gap. We've built our own pseudo-historic village. We've done our own research to build representative buildings, and then we use archaeology as a way to actually engage the resources that are left. And you'd be surprised how much survives the fire. You just can't see it till we get our hands dirty.
Right. I was just saying, this is the beautiful statue,
which invokes the Runaway Scrape. So yeah, that was something that our commissioners, who are governor appointed, that helped operate our agency, they were the ones who thought this would be a great subject story, and I can't disagree with them. The only thing some of my visitors will joke about when they come up, they're looking south away from the river, and people that were evacuating the town would have been going north. They would have gone right behind the building across the river. But it's a minor tweak.
I was going to say, and those of us that don't know, but I tell you what, having a house and a family and whatever, you've got to respect these people, whether they wanted to do it or were told to do it.
Sure.
I mean, and I know that's the scorched earth
right.
philosophy. You leave nothing for the enemy coming up.
Exactly. So. And to your point, you bring it up in a good context. The Runaway Scrape is primarily a women and children story, right? So the men, most of them are volunteering or participating in the military campaign. There are men, either elderly men or infirm men, who are part of the Runaway Scrape as well. But it's an interesting component where civilians are directly impacted by these decisions, and women and children particularly are now functionally on the front line.
Wow. Well, here, I love this picture. This is beautiful. This was your
so that was
opening.
April of 2018. Yeah. So for those of you local who haven't found us yet, you still got time in the first decade to come see what we're all about. So we opened April of 2018. Like I said, there were local stakeholders who were frustrated that it had taken so long to get there. And usually my apology to them was, we needed to figure out how to get some of the archaeology right. And we needed to figure out, we have the benefit, if you're watching local news, if you're a history nerd keeping up with this, all of the big museums that you love, that we have direct connections to, like the Alamo, like San Jacinto, like Washington on the Brazos, they're all going through a refresh right now. So they're all being updated. They're having exhibits change. because we never had a first due. We were built in this more modern era, so we already have some of the technology and things that a lot of people expect to see in a museum, interactives and those sorts of things. So it's a fun experience to come out. Obviously, it has some really core, important Texas history to it, but we find there's enough to offer that everyone from grandma to the grandkid is going to find something to keep them entertained.
Yeah, this is a beautiful aerial shot. I mean, those grounds are so well kept. Like I said, I came out there and I was just in awe, and I thought, oh, here we go. Got to go give it a visit. All right, now here.
So this is the interior of the exhibit, and you can kind of get a sense. We did make a decision that was a developing one. We did not plan for this museum with the intent of putting an historic structure in it. Well, we had a donor find us who offered us that cabin, which was originally built near Columbus.
Oh, wow.
So that's a cabin that we think was built in Austin's colony in the 1830s. And so we were able to dismantle it and bring it over. The modern lumber, of course, is the replacement stuff we had to put on it. And then that desk that I mentioned, that 200-year-old desk, is sitting right there in the front of that.
Oh, is this it? Right
yeah, that's it. So that piece we think was made for Stephen F. Austin in 1825, and it's a traveling desk. So it's essentially a file cabinet and a working desk all in one. You load it up, throw it in the wagon, and take it off. It has its own really amazing preservation story, which is fun for us to talk about. It's hard to imagine some of these things are still here today.
I was going to say, but they said things were built better back then.
Well, that's true. But it had to survive that runaway scrape and the fire and all those things too. So somebody was the caretaker who kept moving it around. And ultimately, kind of the weird story that's not directly connected to us other than the documents that were in it, the desk, through some of Stephen F. Austin's sister's descendants, ended up in El Paso around the time of World War II and was lost for a little while and then rediscovered. And the family seemingly had forgotten there were hundreds, if not thousands, of documents signed by Stephen F. Austin, written by his father, Moses Austin, and all these Texas players. So that became a substantial donation to both the Briscoe Center at the University of Texas and also to the Beinecke Library at Yale. So they hold a lot of the Stephen F. Austin materials.
Wow. Okay, Nicole, I'm going to go with you. When the kids come in and they look at this, are they awed?
Usually they have some fast feet. They're ready to get from place to place to place to see everything that we have here. So this is actually a great image of what you see when you first walk into the museum gallery. There is an introductory film on the other side of this exhibit that we're seeing here to introduce the story of San Felipe de Austin, introduce the story of Stephen F. Austin, and get us up to about the war starting. Okay. So there are a number of different interactive screens. Right now you can see our largest one, which has a number of different information bubbles on it to give you an information about the town and what it may have looked like.
That's this one that I'm showing here?
That's this one that we have here. So you can see some of those bubbles kind of in the foreground or the background there. And all of those contain a multitude of images and information.
Do you touch them or do you go near them?
You can touch them as much as you'd like. Oh, wow. So even my groups of 30-some school kids can't get it to freeze very often. So you can explore that impressive. As long as you'd like. Yeah.
I was like,
one of the things that I thought was the most impressive when I went over to the museum, it amazed me that how modern it was.
Sure. I think that is a surprising feel to people. We have some folks that are very kind in telling us that we have the vibe of a really important and current museum, and that's true.
Yes.
The currentness again is because we are pretty new. We're only about 8 years out in terms of operation. But in terms of that wall, just to help you understand, Shelley, there are a number of different thematic stories. So you open those up, and then there are a number of hotspots where you can pull up facts or pictures, as Nicole mentioned. And so kids really get into it. I think one of the things that's a fun thing for us, a lot of us who've been at this for a while tend to make a real slow and focused approach to history. Kids are moving fast, like Nicole said. They want to see everything. They're going to see it as soon as they can. So a lot of programming is very designed for them to help them navigate at their speed.
I was going to say, I was a first grade teacher. And anybody who's watched the show knows I was a first grade teacher. And so I understand it. Oh my gosh. What was bad was most of the time when we would take the kids, I was just as interested. In fact, I was probably more interested. And I especially love like the pieces of plate.
So I was going to say, that's our core archaeology exhibit as it currently exists.
Meaning it stays there all the time.
This is our permanent exhibit. Now, we certainly, if we're going to treat a modern museum right by sort of the standards of storytelling today, we're approaching a window where we need to start thinking about making changes in this exhibit, right?
Right.
Partly that's because we found new stuff. Partly that's because some of the stuff we have out needs a rest and we want to bring in some other storylines. But sometime in the next 2 to 3 years, we should be looking seriously at how we update this permanent exhibit. But we knew we had a plan for putting some archaeology on display. And that's really one of the first things you see as you come around that main turn before the digital wall. I'm going to share with you in a little more detail later on, but we're working on a new archaeological lab facility that's going to help us give people that experience. So,
I was just saying, now who are these lovely ladies?
So these are people that work with our agency as staff archaeologists. The one on the right in the red shirt is our actual site-based staff archaeologist,
Okay.
Dr. Sarah Chesney. The other two women in the pink shirt, Tiffany Osborne, who's worked for our agency for decades, was part of the French explorer Lassalle's La Belle shipwreck exploration and also the Fort St. Louis project. And then in the middle, Jamie Ross works with our archaeological collections in Austin. And because we are an archaeological site and we're active, she's very invested in things we do. But Dr. Chesney, Sarah, is the one who helps us plan for stewardship and excavation at the site. And our current schedule, we try to do 2 excavations a year, usually a spring and a fall dig. Even with that, most of our visitors don't come while we have holes in the ground. And so this lab, which will open in a little more than a year, will give people a chance to see what we're finding, kind of see us processing what we're
So this picture shows this is some of the...
So that was one of the very first significant excavations we did about 2014, 2013, when we were trying to discover an architectural footprint of a building that we thought would have substantive remains.
Okay.
And it's the brick cellar of a hotel building. And so we knew where we thought the hotel was. We knew there should be a big pile of brick. And as that image shows, we were able to get out and come down on top of it and start doing a little bit of exploration. That's one of the buildings that we've now recreated as part of our outdoor exhibit. And then these are just objects that have some really unique associations that help us interpretively. All of those are on display in the permanent exhibit. The type piece, there were 2 different chapters of printing history in the short life of the historic town of San Felipe. And that first piece of type, that letter K, is associated with the first printer in town, who was there from about 1829 to 1832, running a newspaper. The piece of cut money, you'd asked me about this earlier.
Yes.
This is a common adaptive practice. It's not unique to San Felipe de Austin, but certainly it happened there a lot, where when residents didn't have a lot of coinage, and in this case what they primarily had was a Spanish 8 real coin that they would refer to as a silver dollar or peso, that was very generic in that sense. But they would chop it up to make denominational coinage. So they would either cut or break the coin down into quarters and then eighths. And so this is a 1/8 cut of one of those coins. It would have been, 7 more pieces of it in its original context. And then the dominoes we found associated with the location that we think was William Travis's last law office. I can't tell you they belonged to him, but he certainly was an occasional gamer. He liked to make his way around the taverns and gamble from time to time. And that's just a beautiful patina on that burned piece of domino, which gives us a great reflection of the story. Those are bone-faced dominoes. So
I was going to say,
animal bone.
It was funny when you first showed them to me. For some unknown reason, I thought they were crackers.
Oh, there you go.
And I couldn't figure out how in the world that a cracker has survived that long. And then you said domino, and I thought, well, Steve,
They were dice.
Yeah.
Oh, you thought they were dice? Okay. But I guess because of the color and everything, I just thought cracker. And it just...
This is a rare one for us in that, we don't have a lot of wood or bone items that survive being exposed to the fire. So, and you can see those were found associated with the other. One of them obviously took the brunt of some heat. The other one came through pretty much unscathed. And it's a fun thing for us.
When they dig like 4x4 plots to make sure tight, to keep it.
It can vary depending on the type of excavation we're doing, but to your point, yes, it's a controlled excavation. So they define what their dig unit's going to be, and then they're digging in measurements that define the size of the square and also the depth of the layer. And that has to do with how they want to contextualize and associate objects to each other. We run pretty tight in the scheme of things. It's pretty narrow.
Kind of like with the dinosaurs, it's, if it's near the top, it's obviously younger. If it's deeper, it's older. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Go me, archaeologist.
So there you can see a fairly small, that's a test unit that Dr. Chesney is looking at. A lot of the work we've done over the last decade, and she was hired 7 years ago, the one 7 years ago, the work that we've done has been based on the improvements we're making to the site. So it's what we often call clearance archaeology. We have a preservation responsibility to make sure that building a new building isn't going to destroy something underground. So we try to take a look to see if we have a footprint of anything we need to worry about. So she's done a lot of that.
It's that look before you dig.
Yeah, it's kind of same kind of thing. We don't find any utility cables, but we might find part of a building or something else we want to make sure we avoid.
Right. Oh, this I love.
Yeah, I'm going to let Nicole tell you about making dresses.
Yes. So Allison,
is that you? And
that is me. I'm on the right side here.
That's our
Dr. Sarah is actually on the left side. And then Allison, one of our educators there, is much more talented at sewing than I am. So she does a lot of our period clothing construction and tailoring for the most part. So we have 2 models here, making sure these fit. So she hemmed one to my length, and I have promptly destroyed one of the dresses she's made for me because I'm always rolling around in the dirt. I'm always working around a fire, and I have some scorch marks on my dress now, which...
Well, but that's very authentic.
Yes, I tell her I use that interpretively. So whenever visitors come and talk about dangers of working around fire, I can tell them that most of the time when my dress singes on the edges, it's usually out before I even notice.
I was going to say, if I lived at that time, I'd have been one of the casualties. I would have wound up setting myself off.
I told one of our volunteers it's a mark of a true hearth cook when you have a scorch mark on your dress.
There you go. Exactly.
So for really core museum goers, it's rare, but we'll occasionally get questions from people about wanting to come back and see where the history happens. So this is a rare picture of our back of house space, which, as you can see, is overflowing with resources and information. But that's where the staff get together to get ready for a history.
Okay, now the patterns, are they historically accurate patterns, like from the old goodies catalogs and things like that?
That's a great question. So there are different examples of historic clothing that survives today. I like to joke with people that what survives is usually what was worn least often. So what you really wore it was what got destroyed and what you had to throw out. But there are examples of items that survive: shoes, clothes, undergarments, all that kind of thing. And our patterns are based off of those for the most part. Some of them are commercially produced today, and some of them are ones that people go and check out these garments in museums and then make patterns based off of them. So this one is based off of a dress that Allison had a pattern that Allison had access to. She mocked it up. She got it sewed very quickly, I might add, and something that can fit the variety of people that we have that volunteer and work for us. And so that way, as a museum, it makes a little more sense than to tailor something specifically to one person's measurements. We can use that dress over and over with multiple different people. Yeah, so that's where the museum badge comes in a bit.
Your plus size,
Well, to Nicole's point, there's a lot of resources that can help us choose representative items. It will be appropriate to the time, and in many ways even appropriate to the place. We've worked really hard to figure out what types of product were the merchants in town having shipped in to sell, and what kind of patterns. I mentioned William Travis earlier. He considered himself kind of a modern man on the clothing front. He wanted to have things that were popular in New Orleans or New York City, and so he would chase those kinds of things. A little bit of a dandy in that regard, right. Yeah. So what we can't do, which Nicole kind of alluded to, is we can't often confirm this pattern dress was here being worn by somebody, right? That's a harder test to leap over. But the probate records I mentioned earlier, talking about that seal, probate is a way that we get a ton of information, because you're living on the frontier, someone dies, there are a number of lists that get generated based on that death. There's a list of who you owe, there's a list of who owes you, and there's a list of what you own. And then the lawyers swoop in and try to turn that all into zeros. How do we balance this out?
Right.
So that you don't owe anybody now that you're gone. Nobody owes you anymore if you have heirs. And whatever we have to sell off of your stuff to get there, we know what's available. So it's a real valuable resource to us and can give us some of these insights.
Wow. Well, this kind of leads into my next question about, like, what are I know you guys do a lot of historical reenactments and things like that. And so that kind of leads into some of these things. You have several slides, and I'm excited. What are people in for if they come and visit with y'all?
Yes. So when you come visit us, especially on Saturdays at the museum, we will typically have some sort of activity going on somewhere around the museum. A lot of that is based in our outdoor exhibit where we do living history. So in this particular image, we have Joseph, another one of our educators here, and he is working on a portable printing press is what he's doing. So we do have a full printing shop at the Via de Austin is what we call it as well. And when we have printers out there, you can come see how print devices are used. There we go. There's one. There's our full-size print press. And you can come out. You can see how it's used. And we're out there a number of times. We have volunteers out there usually on Friday mornings to work our print press. And then we have a variety of other activities that happen all over the place outside in the Via there. So we have a hotel, we have a commercial kitchen, we have a schoolhouse, and our activities usually revolve either around the people that were there in the town at the time the town existed, or that revolve around the buildings that we have recreated.
Okay, so like if I come out there and I make one of these, do I get to take it home?
You do. Yes.
Awesome. Now that leads me, again, I tend to wander and I neglected to ask, how much does it cost to get in and how much are the activities?
Sure. So our base ticket price is $10. There are a number of discounts. Very few people pay a full price admission, as it were. And one of the things we really like to do, Austin County residents, since we're here celebrating Hello Austin County with you guys, we started this premise almost a decade ago with the idea that locals should get some benefit when they're coming to be tourists in their backyard. So we do a 20% discount if you're from Austin County. So just having a zip code here in the county would get you that off the top. And then, of course, like all museums, we have discounted prices for seniors and for veterans. We do a discount program with the state park that's just down the road from us to encourage crossover traffic. We don't usually charge additional programming costs, but that's something we're starting to work with. We may have more fee-based workshops where you come and make and take something, and for the cost of those materials, there may be an associated cost. But right now, it's generally less than $10 per person in your family. We do a family bundle, which is incredibly popular, 2 adults and 2 kids. Or maybe it's 2 adults and 1 kid now. We made some changes.
Yeah.
But it's about $23, $22 for the group. So it's a very reasonable price point. And that helps us kind of keep things moving and keep things afloat out there as part of our program offering.
As I say, it's like anything else, you've got to, make that money's. Hold on, I'm fixing this. Talking about money made me sneeze. But that's the thing.
I was going to say, I had one when I was over there and saw the printing press. Didn't you say that was specially made?
So this was a real interesting challenge for us. We knew when you start identifying how you're going to distinguish your story.
This one? Okay.
Yeah. When we start talking about how you're going to distinguish your story from other museums, and of course, we're thrilled to have great connections to the Revolution sites like the Alamo and San Jacinto and Presidio La Bahia and Washington the Brazos, but we wanted to help figure out where are the things that people would come and find us memorable because of, and the printing story is certainly one of those. It's a little challenged because we have 2 different printing stories that take place in the short life of the historic town. But we knew we wanted to build this print shop as part of our outdoor exhibit, which, as Nicole mentioned, we call the Via de Austin. It opened about 4 years ago now almost. And we knew that particular press, which was the style of press we thought we needed, had been made as a museum quality replica in the 1990s. Our particular press was in the possession of the donor creator. His name is John Horn, who is a very savvy and very invested printing historian. He's a avid printer himself. He has a warehouse full of printers and presses from all over the country and from various eras. And he had a version of this press made for the Historic Arkansas Museum. They had a print shop that had the same time frame. So what we knew was that they'd done their research, they'd looked at historic models, they'd created blueprints, and they'd had 2 presses made. We knew we weren't going to get the one that the museum had or was donated to them, and we really didn't think we were going to get his either, that he's a collector, and that didn't necessarily speak to us getting it. So our initial approach was, could we use the blueprints to have our own made? And then we found nobody wanted to tackle the problem of making it. So we tried to go back to the original curator who John worked with and say, what about him? And he had retired and literally built his own sailboat to cruise the world. And so he wasn't excited about spending another year making a press. And ultimately, John Horn, the donor, seemed to get excited that we wanted to make this a really available technology to our visitors, to let them get in there and see it working, to help them understand. And he decided to generously gift us his press. And so we went and got it as we were building that outdoor exhibit. But it is, it's a functional museum replica, like I said. So it looks like what it would have historically, but it's designed to be used. And we certainly do that.
I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's a great story. Great way to, people locally sometimes are looking at what could I come and volunteer or come and do at your place that I can't do many other places. And the printing press is certainly one of those.
I was just saying, and I asked you about the gardening because when I saw this, I thought about my mother and her garden. And so the things that you plant would have been things that they would have grown.
Yes. So we are very, very lucky to have Bluebonnet Master Gardeners who come and help us maintain this garden. I tried by myself for about a year or two, and it was very, very difficult to tackle on my own. But working with Bluebonnet Master Gardeners, we have a list of different vegetables and things that we do plant in the garden to show people what was likely grown here in Austin's colony 200 years ago. And the fascinating thing about it is that when you look at seeds 200 years old, they're hard to find. They're a lot easier to find once you get past about 1850. So it's a true challenge, but they have been so up to and willing to work with us in helping maintain this garden and plant this garden. They did just plant our spring garden a couple weeks ago, so we are starting to see the results of those seeds pop up. And my big goal this year for me personally is to grow indigo in this garden. I'm really looking forward to being able to do that.
So two things while you've got that picture up. Obviously, well, three really. Obviously, the master gardeners have been a great benefit to us as a volunteer pool. And for those calling us out on the history front, no, there was no Walmart and no latex water hoses, right? There's a reality in terms of resource. Pioneers who are very hardy and doing all these things in their gardens. We can't recreate that lifestyle every day.
We are not hardy.
We're trying to keep things alive. What we try to do is not use the garden hose when you're out visiting, right? So it's like a zoo or anything else where there's a what's shown to the public and then there's what happens behind the scenes to make it all look good. And then I wanted to mention, since we were talking about it, that's the print shop in the background of that shot. So that's one of the first buildings that you come to when you visit the Via.
I'm going to guess that's not the first time someone's told you something like that about a hose or anything.
It's an interesting thing when you have a site that does any kind of living history. For many people, the entertainment is partially history, but a lot of it is just toying around with the anachronism, right? That's how Sun guys are cool with their friends and family, is to point out, gee, you think they had that back in the day? So we do our best to avoid those moments, but it's an odd part of the visitor experience.
Of course it is. Okay, I'm going to go back to Nicole.
Of course, I've got a modern building sitting right next to us.
Well, and I was going to say, and somebody's taking a picture. So
sure, exactly.
And a full color picture.
Exactly.
Anyway. All right, so you talked about the kids, and we've talked about some of the things for the families, but the schools.
Yes.
Again, school teacher here. What are the programs that you can come and see, and how often do they offer them? And
so we do school tours with different, both public and private schools. We do that by reservation. And our spring calendar is very full right now, too. So if you're interested in maybe doing it in the that was last year. 2025-2026 school year, I would be more than happy to give any information to educators who are interested. Our school tour options range from 2 to 3 hours per day, and they also range from $4 to $6 per student.
And then is it one of those, can they bring the picnic lunch?
Yes, we do have some picnic tables. We can host students for a lunch. I've worked with schools that have closer time frames that they're working with, and we're very, very willing to work with them. And then by partnering with our Friends organization, the Friends of San Felipe de Austin State Historic Site, we are very, very thrilled to be able to offer free school tours to public school students in Austin County and Waller County as well. So if you're a 4th grade or a 7th grade student in one of those counties, or a teacher of one of those students, we can get you a school tour booked on the books for free.
I was saying, we're gonna definitely link all that information. Sure. I always tell everybody about midway, we're going to link all this information at the end. So anything you guys are talking about, we're going to have it, so people don't have to get out that piece of paper. That was
an important touch point for our friends group. I'm glad Nicole brought it up. when we first got started, when the facility opened, they weren't sure that financially they were in a position to do that, to make these underwritten field trips available. They probably were, but I think our hope at the time was to find donor partners in the county that would keep that sustainable each year. And functionally they have. It just fell about a little more organically than they thought. So most of the school districts locally are coming out at some grade level. We certainly want to spread the word to any of you as parents or local residents who have this interest. We're excited about a lot of what's happening in the school districts in terms of, both Sealy and Belleville are doing culinary programs, which we can easily see a crossover and doing some things with us, whether it's programmatic or otherwise. So we're looking at ways to partner. We actually are hosting our first ever kind of a history fair day, which is a test for us this year. That's going to involve Belleville ISD and multiple campuses, multiple grade levels, coming out in May for a day where it's just them to come out and see all kinds of history excitement. And a lot of partners have stepped up, including people that you here locally would know. Cowboy Zamansky, the blacksmith in Belleville, is going to come out and be part of that program. We've got the Historical Society in Belleville, the County Historical Commission for Austin County. So a lot of people that are going to come participate and help us pull that together.
I was going to say, I'm sure Judge Lapham will be out there. That man is everywhere.
We can make that happen.
You hear that, Judge Lapham? Okay, so I went ahead and pulled up the website here because it showed, these are Boy Scouts I see here. And
we do programs for Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts as well. We offer different badge programs, including the Texas badge and a few different Girl Scout badges at different levels.
Okay.
We also do guided tours for Scout groups as well.
Okay. But I thought this was very interesting, and I love this one. Look at them having a great time.
So most of these photos came from the opening in November of 21 of that outdoor exhibit, the Via de Austin. I might get you to go back for just a second, 2 images, and you certainly didn't do this on purpose, and I'm excited that I saw it.
Let's see.
It's the one, let's see if you can get back to it.
Oh, there's the back key.
This one.
But
it's not what anyone else would be focused on in this photo, but I'm very excited. This gentleman that you happen to see in the foreground with the sunglasses on
here
he was just an important donor. We just received a 15-acre donation from his family. David Hill is his name, to help us with some of this archaeological planning, and that's gonna be play a big role in what we do to develop that going forward. So he was here with some of his family helping us unveil that outdoor exhibit, and very excited to see that. And I think behind him that might be precinct Commissioner Chip Reed, so he's been a great partner of ours too. Maybe he was there that day.
Okay, might be. I see him at Commissioner's Court.
Yeah, there you go.
So, but yeah, like I said, I love this thing, seeing the kids enjoy themselves. And there's your interactive board. And they do truly, truly love the interactive. So then they can see all the different. Oh, there's a better picture of your.
There's the cabin. Yeah.
Cabin. Now, can you go into the cabin?
Yes, it's an exhibit, so you would walk into it, and it's actually got an interactive element inside it. That's what we call an immigrant trunk that tells some stories of the different types of people that were coming to Austin's colony. So it's got a number of different things displayed there. We're actually working on updating. There's a cabinet for that space, which happens to be one of the few places we can still get objects on display when we are bringing them in. So we're working on that redo here soon.
Okay, basically I just wanted to go here. You have all sorts of things. Oh, here's your flags over Texas.
So this is our page on the Texas Historical Commission website, and that's the easiest way to find easy information about what's going on at the site. We also are very active on Facebook, and so we post a lot of things, including recent things that have happened at the site as a result.
Here on Facebook.
Yeah.
And we try and post our events anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks out. So if you're planning a trip in the near future, you can turn to our Facebook page or to our website and find those events that are happening whenever you're planning on visiting.
And also, I try very hard to post them.
Sure, appreciate that.
There, and then we have them on the events calendar too. So you guys are getting cross.
Scroll back up just for 1 second. Yep, that one right there.
This one, okay.
So I think this is going to air after that program, but I do want to let people know the last Thursday of most months. It's not the whole year because we get into conflict with Christmas and we usually take a summer month off. But the last Thursday of most months, we do an evening program. A lot of our local stakeholders had come to us years ago and said, I have a job. I can't come out there during weekdays.
Right.
And, weekends, I'm dealing with kids in real life. And so we do a Thursday night program that is often lecture-based, speaker-based. We've done some that are more interactive. Over the last couple of years, Nicole and her crew have put together a cemetery tour that we do at the historic cemetery in San Felipe. So you might notice that the name of the person who's speaking in March,
Sorry.
looks familiar. It's yeah, there you go.
Who is this person?
Yes. So my husband and I have the exact same job in 2 different locations. He works at Washington on the Brazos State Historic Site, and I work here at San Felipe de Austin State
Okay, now
Historic.
is there competition when you get home like my museum has?
Well, the funny thing is whenever we're talking with visitors out and about, typically we'll find out if the other one sent them to us. So there's been a number of times where they said, I think I talked to your spouse at the other museum, and they told me to come here. So
That's good, though.
We like to have a puncher's shot at popularity. Obviously, Washington on the Brazos is one of the most known and beloved sites in the state of Texas.
Right.
But we work very, very closely with them. We don't always have the benefit of a crossover staff connection where a married couple's at one or the other, but it's a fun connection for us, and it gives us a chance to bring Tynan and some of the resources from that site down to do programming for us. So that's fun.
That's nifty, and that's what I was going to say. You were talking about the programs. Let me go back through here. They have you guys have your different programs. Let's get through here. You have people come and talk.
Yeah, that's the Thursday night that I mentioned. So I think we have a couple of promotional slide images for you at the end here.
Yeah, there we go.
So this is one that we did in December, and you can't really tell, they're far away from us, but we did a program 5 years ago with 2 very prominent Texas writers and kind of men of letters, Stephen Harrigan and Joe Hawley. And they graced us. They came back 5 years later, just this past December, to do kind of a follow-up program. So that was a lot of fun for us. Stephen Harrigan is a very popular Texas Monthly writer and has written a number of books, including about an 800-page book on the history of Texas that had come out 5 years ago. That was the motivation to have them then. And Joe is the columnist who writes the Native Texan column for the Chronicle, but also writes a number of book pieces. So our stories have been featured in the Native Texan column many times, people that were walking the streets of San Felipe de Austin and that kind of thing. That's a fun thing for us to do.
Well, yeah. Let's see. We'll come back to that.
Sure.
This is just this is Nicole's wheelhouse. It's the
Yes.
summer camp.
This was our first year doing summer camp back in 2024 for the public. And we do plan on redoing that again this year in June. You'll see the dates pop up on the website here before too long for booking in July. I'm sorry, not June. It's in July. And we will host a public camp for kids age 10 to 12. And the registration for that is $40 for 4 days a week.
Oh, okay.
And you can see from this image, obviously we know it could be 1,000 degrees in July. So we use all parts of the site. So the kids are not outdoors the whole day. We try to move them around and give them a lot of fun things to do.
Yeah.
Believe me, we hear it if they're hot. So we try and keep them cool as much as possible.
Yeah.
And then we've been it's been very fun to work with the Washington County and Austin County Boys and Girls Club as well. So we've been working with them for different camps. Washington County Boys and Girls Club does go to Washington on the Brazos, and then we got tag teamed with them a couple years ago. And that's been super fun to welcome those kids to our camp programs.
So organizationally, that's actually a program that the County Historical Commission in Washington County had initiated and then approached. I actually serve as the county chairman here in Austin County, and they approached us about joining in. And as Nicole mentioned, the target audience are the Boys and Girls Clubs chapters that are in those counties. We've also included Waller County in one of these camp events that we had to bring out some more kids.
I was going to say, that's wonderful because they just love it. Now, okay, we've talked about the kids. Now, what if I decide, I'm a local history enthusiast, what can I do to help?
That's a great question. And we are always, always, always welcome to interested in bringing you volunteers to our site. And you can volunteer in a variety of different ways. Some of them are as simple as helping us with History at Night programs, so helping us entertain people before the program begins. Some of them are helping with school tours. If you really love kids, that's a great way to help out in helping the kids at that tour with us. It takes at least 9 of us any given day to run a school tour. So it's quite a few bodies that we have to use in order to entertain all those kids. And then we also have living history programs where we have volunteers help us with those programs outside. that can be as often as once a week if you really love to do that kind of thing, or as little as a couple of times a year if you just live further away and want to help out but just can't get to us very often.
I was just saying my next question was talking about the reenactors. Let's say, like, we have this gentleman who portrays Stephen F. Austin.
Andrew's been a long participant at our sites and has been very generous in coming and helping us do some Stephen F. Austin interpretation. And he's got a decent passing resemblance to the father of Texas. So he's been a great supporter of ours. And he is an amateur historian in his own right and is very well invested. So he's a fun partner to come out. I do want to add, living history is an important part of this. It also can be pretty intimidating for people. You usually have this calling. You're already a living historian generally before you come volunteer at our place, although we have trained some up who wanted to come start from scratch, and we're happy to do that. But to Nicole's point, we have these great resources with the living history staging and the outdoor buildings. We do programming out there that doesn't involve costuming. So my printers that Nicole mentioned, most of the time they're in street clothes. They're demonstrating the artifact. They're trying to put the tools in the hands of our visitors for a unique experience. They also cross over and do dress out for us from time to time, but that's not a requirement. On top of that, we do a lot of structured tours, not just for kids. We do bus tours for seniors and that sort of thing. So if you thought you'd like to come chat with folks who are visiting our area for 90 minutes and lead them on a tour of the site, that's something we can train people to do. And practically any skill set that's applicable in the workforce, we have need of. People that want to work with social media, people that want to come take photos and help us generate content.
If you just want to mow grass,
we can put you on a mower. Absolutely.
Help you mow grass.
We never have enough grass mowers, as our maintenance guy will tell you.
There's your new job.
And then, as I mentioned, printing is a big deal. We get a lot of questions about archaeology, and we're thrilled. People are excited that we use that mechanism to help tell our stories. That's one of the more technical things we do. And it's also one of the things that we have to get right because we only get to do it once. Right. So we don't have a chance to turn people entirely loose on the volunteer front in archaeology. But there are parts of those processes, including excavations, that we can have people participate in as volunteers. A lot of it has to do with screening objects once the excavation work has been done in the units, that we can guide them in that process. But there's going to be a lot more opportunities coming up. And our staff archaeologist, Dr. Chesney, is looking for the opportunity to perhaps train some people who will do some unique and localized things with the new lab when it comes online.
I was going to say, and I know you've mentioned several of them, but if you don't mind just kind of going through, like, who all are you partner with? Like, you talked about the Washington on the Brazos and different things. Like, who are some of the I guess the more, not prominent, but the more consistent ones that you collaborate with?
So all of the Texas Revolution sites have had a history that predates our facility existing of partnering and working to tell that story. Now that most of those sites are under the mantle of the Texas Historical Commission, that makes it easier, right? We're encouraged by our employer. It's not so much finding time and resource. We're encouraged to go out and be part of these opportunities other places. Most of those sites also participate with the Alamo, of course, which is managed by the General Land Office as a state agency. So there's a lot of crossover. And I think one of the things you asked me earlier was how invested we get with, other historians and content. And that's part of it too. These are all places that are continuing to learn things about their own story. And so we try to share those resources in ways that are compelling and can help add some depth to the stories. I joked when we were planning for this facility, somewhat out of envy. I mean, this was my jealousy for them, that the really well-known Texas Revolution sites all have a very specific moment that something happened. Men died and a battle was lost at the Alamo. There's a Declaration of Independence at Washington. There's a victory at San Jacinto. And the Presidio, of course, has a very focused story related to the capture and then massacre there, even though its history is hugely expansive. And so for us, we struggled to figure out what our story was because we're sort of the immigrant, political, sausage-making, war government. It's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot more nuanced. And we ultimately landed on probably the most important moment of the town's history is the burning, which is why we focus on that as that very dramatic moment. In fact, we're pretty close to that anniversary. So right around the time you air this program, March 29th, historically, is the day that the town was burned. And so we always, this time of year, are talking about revolution stories or talking about our connection to those sites. And then as an extension, we're talking about archaeology because that's how we learn more about that story today.
I was going to say, that's, once again, that's women helping out. I mean, that's kind of nifty because a lot of times, like you said, mostly what you hear about is the men. The men go fight. The men did this. And this was a chance for the women are fiercely, my town, my family, my children, and that's a good way to show what they
that picture
did.
That's neat. I'd never seen that before till I went to
this
we
one.
don't think about the fact if you
Sam's desk?
yeah, how do you teach with their hubbies?
Right.
He said we don't have paper and pens, and I thought, how'd they learn?
Well, it's easy for us to talk about how limited resources were. Both of our 2-chapter print shops spend time griping about how hard it is to get paper to print on. So it's very easy in those moments where nobody can get things to write on to tell people in the schoolroom they're using slates and they're using sand desks so that they don't have to use a consumable resource.
And what's funny is now they consider that to be, a cool new way to write, write in sand, and they don't realize
Get out there and get involved.
way back when. Go ahead, Greg.
So resourceful.
Oh, absolutely.
I guess I was the part of it. You need to teach your kids what better way to do. So let's accommodate, what nature has to offer.
So here's an interesting part of pioneer resourcefulness that's a challenge for us. Because our town was burned, we'll get visitors say, well, at least you could go out and see where the footprints of the bricks were, like fireplaces for a building. And sometimes that's true. But there were efforts to rebuild the town after it was destroyed. Obviously, there's a modern town there now. And the people that came back initially, they all saw dilapidated fireplaces and said, well, there's a stack of bricks I can use. I don't have to worry about making any more.
Right.
So our resources that survived were often recycled and the dice were rolled over again. So it's, finding that basement underground, that was a unique feature that was harder for them to navigate. But most of the pieces that they could reuse got reused. And so it's hard for us to pluck that story out cleanly all the time. To that end, on archaeology, I do want to end just by helping local visitors understand. If you haven't been to the museum, we'd love to have you. And I think it's worth your time to come see what is essentially a world-class museum right here in your backyard in Austin County. I had some early visitors, not from here, who would come in and say, why did the state build this here? Why did these millions of dollars get spent for this story here? And our agency's tagline is real places telling real stories. So we tell people, this is the place. That's why it's here. This is where these things were happening. For us, what I'm extremely excited about is that the story is still evolving. We're still finding new tools, better ways to tell it to you. We're actually about to launch what will be our second significant capital campaign related to this project, aimed at improving this public archaeology experience. So we have the funding for the lab. We're going to be doing a lot of other support funding for things that can help us do better archaeology and help us do exhibits related to that. So you may hear about that in the near future. This donation of land, 15 acres of land along the Brazos River, is going to be key to that. One of the things that I was surprised to learn interacting with the staff or with the visitors that we do, visitors to both the state park and to our site are often frustrated that they know they're close to a river, but there's not easy access to it. So they're confused. They can't see it. They're not sure where it is. I went out and did some walking around on the new piece of land that we acquired in December, and it has a bluff that may be the best look at the Brazos River in town. And we're super excited that as we develop that side and can create a pathway access to it, it's probably going to be the place that everyone who wants to see the Brazos River in town is going to try to get to. And so that'll be fun for us. On top of that, we'll be doing these twice-a-year excavations. We'll be finding ways to share those things in our lab. The lab facility actually is going to sit east of that outdoor exhibit. East may be meaningless, but the idea of the experience will be you come into the main building, and the pictures you've shown, people will see that exhibit. They'll go outside and navigate the landscape where we interpret some archaeology at its location with panels, but then they go through the recreations, the replicated buildings, and then they'll go past that and arrive at the public lab. And, Dr. Chesney and I have joked, a lot of these pieces that have been created to help the visitor understand the site all become extensions of the same story, where you can stand at that digital mural that we showed you earlier and point to some of the buildings that we've excavated the footprint of now and possibly see artifacts in the lab that are coming from those excavations that you'll see there on the ground. So it's a great point of connection.
So it all works together.
Yeah.
Okay, we're kind of getting to the end. I want to know, you talk about different activities, and I realize that summer is coming up, and people are not thinking about, holidays and stuff other than maybe 4th of July and stuff. But I know that y'all do different holiday themed or seasonal themed activities. tell me about a few of those, and I guess, how do you use them to bring the history to life?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if you're alluding to Christmas time programming, we do have Christmas in San Felipe, where we also participate in the town Christmas parade too. So it's really fun to participate in the town programs and support the community, and then also have a program here at the museum. The backwards thing about it is that they didn't really celebrate Christmas very much in the historic town of San Felipe, but we do try and tie in some of the Mexican traditions that are happening since it is part of Mexico 200 years ago. So talking about things like, I've made Mexican hot chocolate before in the museum, and it's more of a modern event, but can get you in the spirit of the holidays. And funny enough, talking about 4th of July, we are typically open on holidays. So Memorial Day, we're open. Labor Day will be open as well. And we try and do multi-day programs during those. So for Memorial Day coming up, we're actually talking about textile fibers, and we have a number of different activities focusing on each and every day that weekend. 4th of July, we're going back to the basics, red, white, and blue. We're going to talk about cochineal dyeing, which is typically a red dye. We're going to talk about indigo on another day, talking about blue dye, and then we're going to work with some undyed white textiles as well to tie in that red, white, and blue theme.
Very seasonal.
So, to Nicole's point about it's an interesting frustration to interpret a site where Christmas, certainly in the commercial sense that we think of Christmas today, isn't really part of that footprint. Right. I remember when we finished the outdoor exhibit, one of my first local visitors came to me and said, "Those will look great when you slap some Christmas lights on those buildings." And I said, "Yeah, that's really not part of the story that we tell." But I appreciate
you'll see Photoshop some Christmas lights on some promotional stuff coming up to Christmas.
True.
That's funny.
And then I will mention, since you brought up the July 4th component, we're still a year plus, but obviously the United States, if you've heard the American 250 Project, which is to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence in 2026. So next summer, most of us as historic sites will be working with local partners and hosting events, particularly in the summertime, things leading up to July 4th and that sort of thing. So it'll be a good year to be thinking about when you may want to visit not just our site, but other historic sites that have deep connections to both Texas and U.S. history. So that should be a fun thing. But yeah, a lot of our programming, of course, summer isn't always the best of time to get people out and about at some of these historic sites, but we're happy to find some things to do.
Heat, mosquitoes, stuff like that. All right. And so, Greg, if you'll put this back up for me, these are some of the ones that are upcoming.
Those are the next 2 months of our Thursday night program. Yeah. April and May.
Okay. What's a Hoosier Truth in Texas?
Yes. So Chandler, if you haven't gotten the chance to go out to Fanthorpe Inn in Anderson, it's also a wonderful historic site to go visit. Chandler does some awesome programs over there. And Henry Fanthorpe was one of Austin's colonists here in Austin's colony. So he went on to found Fanthorpe Inn, and he came from Indiana prior to coming to Texas. And
why he's the Hoosier.
Which is why he's the Hoosier. There's some interesting things Chandler found when he went to Indiana to do some more research. We're not sure if Henry Fanthorpe lied about some things, but there's definitely documents that say two different things. So
that is a tradition amongst many Austin colony settlers. That's not unique to Mr. Fanthorpe.
Yeah. So if you want to find out what those are, you can come join us.
He may have expanded on things a little bit, huh?
And then I'm excited. The program there in May, that's Chandler in the photo, right? Or is that John?
Chandler is in the photo on the left, and then John is on the right. That's his new photo.
All right. I hadn't seen that photo of John. Yeah. So particularly excited that that's the director of the complex at Washington on the Brazos.
Okay.
So a lot of what he's going to talk about, partially at least, is some of what's going on there now as they go through their redevelopment and get ready to refresh for Texans who want to come back and see. And again, that's the thing that we want to help visitors in the local community understand. Our next temporary exhibit is not on a particular schedule, but it'll be coming soon at some point. So we want to make sure people understand that as we keep improving the site, part of that intent is to keep their pride in the fact that this is in their community. So we want to get you coming back. The most important thing locals can do, if you've been out and you love us and you know we're a great site to go to, then make sure when you have friends and family and people visiting you, maybe colleagues who are coming on a work visit, make sure they know that there's a really unique opportunity to come out and get access to this kind of history.
Well, Chandler, I was going to say, Chandler came to the Belleville Historical Society
Yeah.
to put on one of his programs. And his, I've never seen history done like that.
He's got the theatrical
dressed up.
background. Yeah.
Not just, he takes on the persona.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it was really cool. If someone would have told me that, I'd been like, huh? But once you see it, you're just like, wow. I mean, it was just wow.
He's a very talented living historian and has a lot of theater background that he brings to bear in his programming. So he's a bit of a rock star in the history ranks. We're glad to have him come over and do programming with us.
All right, now here's the big.
Yeah, so this is this is in front of the building right now, right? So that's the latest edition, which is nothing more than a project sign, of course.
Right.
But here in the next few weeks, we're going to go under construction on the lab that I mentioned. And we had truly been working with the Hill family that I mentioned on this land donation for the better part of 20 years. That discussion began before I was hired in 2008. So getting it to the finish line at the end of 2024, having that family very excited to come on as partners, plays a really direct role in how we're now planning for the lab and how we're going to start utilizing this new acreage on the west side. Nicole mentioned at one point that in our exhibit we have a couple of short films. And one of the things we deliberately did to try to help kind of shock people into some awareness is we took a town mostly populated historically by men, a town that people would think about in the context of the Texas Revolution, which is kind of right, kind of wrong. But we had our story narrated in our films by an actress portraying one of the women who lived there, who was a tavern operator. Her name was Angelina Payton. This donated piece of land includes the footprint of that tavern. So some of the archaeology we'll be doing is related to someone we've already identified as an important player in our story. So we're very excited to have that opportunity and start looking around for that. It's also, just for what it's worth, that letter K that we showed you earlier that you had up from the archaeological finds, it was found in this footprint of the tavern. The family allowed some archaeology to be done there about 20 years ago. And that was one of the items that came off of their property. So we know the printer rented a place outside the tavern for just a few months. And then he moved actually closer to the modern museum. But the places we've known to look for him, we've always found set type. So we know that it's an easy thing to lose. These little pieces of metal type you're chasing around a log cabin. So it's going to be a way we keep identifying that story.
Okay, I think one of my last questions, and then I'll let you guys give your last thoughts, is we talked about a lot of archaeological things stuff. Have you found a cemetery? Because cemeteries usually, if you find a gravestone, it'll give you some dates and.
Sure. So one thing that I'm glad you asked that question, because honestly, I think those of us that are close to it, I make assumptions about what people know and don't know about the town. So there is an historic cemetery associated with our site.
Okay.
And we use it geographically in the landscape today to help visitors understand the expanse of the town. So where we sit at the Brazos River, that was the very northern reach of the town. And it's really the part that people occupied and became developed. But when Stephen F. Austin drew the plat of this very large 1,000-acre plat on paper, there was a public cemetery at the southern end. And it is the current cemetery, the historic cemetery that people drive by near the post office in the town today. So that is the formal cemetery. Cemeteries usually, thankfully, you can discover without stumbling across them archaeologically. However, to your point, and we haven't yet, though we're certainly conscious that we could, a lot of people at this time made private burials on their own properties, on their own plots, right? So that may be part of our future. It's not something we've had to encounter yet. We are working with the cemetery associations in San Felipe in order to help them know more about their story, including we're confident there are unmarked burials in that historic cemetery that are from our time period. So I think the earliest gravesite there is from the 1840s, which is associated with a structure we happen to own that we acquired to help support our operation. It's called the Eidman House, which sits right next to the Methodist Church in town. And so the first two burials, I think, in the cemetery that are marked, that are known, are from the Eidman family. German immigrants who are on their way to New Braunfels got sick in our town, and two of them paid the ultimate price, and the family stayed as a result. So anyway, but cemeteries, yeah, that's a big deal for us.
I would say, because they find a lot of interesting things there. But I'm going to go back to the website again. Anything pretty much you need, Greg, if you'll make it big for us. It has all the about stuff. One thing I also like to ask is get involved in donations and things. Like, you guys have a really affordable entrance fee.
Sure.
How do you take endowments, donations,
We
things
do.
like that?
We absolutely
It's
do.
affordable, but it's nowhere near. What
No, and that's why I'm saying if
Right.
people wanted to,
Come.
Right. So kind of it's two chains here. We are a lot of the larger museums like the Alamo that I mentioned earlier and Washington on the Brazos and San Jacinto certainly operate in very distinctive public-private partnerships where there are private nonprofits who are part of the operational footprint of those sites. At San Felipe, we benefit from a long-standing friends group whose history is almost 100 years old. They were the first champions of the town preserving the footprint of this site. And then ultimately they became the operators of what locals know as the Josie Store Museum, and then partnered with us in this transition. We're working with them on that old collection, but they've been the partners to us as our local nonprofit. So they do receive donations on our behalf. And by mission, they spend their money to support the site. So they help us with any number of things. And I should have mentioned when you were talking about programming earlier, they underwrite that History at Night program. So they are the funders. If we have to pay for someone to come speak, or if we have to feed someone, or have to do anything that involves a cost for that program, the Friends underwrite that for us.
okay.
They do not charge an admission. So we take donations on the nights of those programs. That money goes back to our Friends, but that's a free program on those last Thursday nights. We don't charge an admission for that. There are donation boxes throughout our property that are monies that are collected on behalf of our Friends. So if you pay our admission, the state expects to get some financial benefit to operating these facilities. And of course, that makes sense. But if you want to make a donation that stays local and that will support the site, you do that through our Friends group. And
Okay.
I mentioned we're launching a capital campaign. My guess is we'll go formal with it sometime around the beginning of the summer related to this archaeological effort. I do occasionally get visitors who come in and say, we have a donor wall like all museums at the front entrance. I'll have visitors come in and say, if I were going to cut you a check today, what's it take to get your name on the wall there? And yes, that's always a fun discussion to have. The most important part that I want people to understand is that donor wall is also a living, breathing part of our operation. So some places, when you build new construction, you create a wall and you get to the construction and it's over. Right. In our case, we're still recognizing donors. That Hill family that just made this land donation are about to be staged as the highest level donor that this project has ever had, because the value of that land exceeds any previous donation. So it's still an active wall. Those opportunities exist. And for people who want to be part of this next archaeology chapter, there will be some great opportunities.
All right. Well, I guess I hope we've covered most everything. And this will not be your last visit. I hope you will come back.
We're going to be here a while. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, because there, like I said, there's just so many things that go on, and especially as you guys get into the construction and stuff, please come back and let us know how it's going and what's going on, and maybe we'll pack up and come out to y'all. And
we talked about coming and doing some cooking with you in the future, right? So
Yes.
Cooking is an important living history component. I mentioned the print shop being unique. One of the other really unique features at our outdoor exhibit is this bake oven that we know is an historic part of the townscape. So Nicole and her team use that. I think in the coming months and years, you'll see us start to offer historic dinners where you can come and you purchase a ticket and come sit at our tavern and we'll serve you something
now,
fun.
will you be cooking it?
So that's where you
That's
get
the
into
treat. That's that
some,
Hollywood history part.
rules around serving food, of course. But
That's right.
depending on your local, health inspector organization, they're usually pretty willing.
We can't cook food at the site on an open fire that we serve to you, right? That doesn't pass muster. But we can work with potential caterers using recipes that we direct
Gotcha.
to get food out there. We can create the ambiance. It'll look like it came off the fire and the fire will be going, but I can't cook it out there.
And will you have a burned dress to
Sure.
go
You
with
can guarantee.
Promise you that.
have a little bit of
That's right.
extra ambiance there? Well,
Some of your viewers who are watching this are going to know that we had a fire when we were constructing our outdoor exhibit, right?
oh no.
So yeah, you saying that reminds me that I think there was a social media post in town where someone said, that's more authentic than you needed to be, guys. And we would agree. That was not something we were intending to do. But
Yeah, but sometimes those are the ones that make the fun stories that you can always retell.
well, it's funny. In the aftermath of it, it was holding a lot of our replicated items that we were going to put in our store. And I got a call from an archaeology buddy who had nothing to do with the project who said, y'all need to take a look at what burned stuff looks like, because you're going to be excavating a bunch of that stuff soon. And we did. So
there you
Dr.
go.
Sarah, we turned it into a learning opportunity. Obviously, we would like to have not had to make an insurance claim and rebuild a structure that we'd already built, and we lost some things that we'll never be able to get back, frankly. But, it was an interesting experience. Certainly a bingo card check none of us expected. So.
Bucket list there.
Yeah, there you go.
Museum bucket list. All right. Well, any parting thoughts?
What do you think, Nicole?
No, if you're interested in coming out and you just want to see what's going to be happening on the day you come out, you can reach out to us by phone, by email. All our contact information is on the website. You can reach out by Facebook Messenger. We check that very regularly. And we're just happy to invite more people to come see us.
Whether you are a history lover or not, as an Austin County resident, we offer a very unique opportunity for you and for your friends and family and people you may want to impress. I'm also very proud. We haven't talked about it at all today, I don't think. We have a very distinctive museum store. And not that we're trying to separate you from your money every time you come out, but we make a point of offering things that you can't easily get other places, whether it's a book or an activity or whatever, a toy or an engagement. And the things that you can get other places, we try not to be the souvenir shop that's raking you over the coals. We try to be very competitive with our pricing. I'm happy to share something I've hoped we have done long before now, but we're very close to. In the next few months, hopefully certainly over the next year, we'll start selling replica copies of the Texas Declaration of Independence, pulled on our print press there at the site. It'll be wet plate printed at the location where the original declaration was made. And we'll be selling those in our gift shop. We are the location of that print job, even though the government had moved to Washington. They didn't have a print shop. So we continued to play that role until the town was burned. This is also something that in early discussions, I'm optimistic are going to be carried by other prominent sites. I'm hopeful that in the future, the Alamo and the Bob Bullock Museum and those places will see an interest in selling these replica copies that were done at the original town. So,
Well, Greg, you know what you're getting for Christmas. He likes all that good stuff. All right. Well, I guess that's it for today. We could talk for hours and hours, but you gotta.
We do. Come buy a ticket.
There you go. Hey, there you go. That's exactly it. But so Austin County, you know what to do. Summertime's coming, and they do have air conditioning, so you don't have to worry. You go outside, get a little warm.
Already treating you better than they treated Stephen F. Austin back in the day. That's
there you
right.
go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You don't have to wear wool, and we do AC the
Oh
place.
God, I can't imagine wearing wool. But anyway, all right. Well, we thank you both for being here, and again, we're going to have you back because I didn't ask not half the questions that I had written down. Because we just kind of kept going. But anyway, I thought
Hello, Austin County. We had a great time coming.
Well, we appreciate it. All right, to Austin County, please don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe our YouTube channel so you can always be up to date on what we're doing. You can also follow us on Facebook. And until next time, Austin County, keep smiling.